Awesome. Happy it's Thursday, right? Yes. So
Yep,
happy
sure is.
Thursday, y'all. I hope that you guys are doing well. Welcome back for another Adobe Live. We are joined again by Aaron Bernstein. Really excited to have you back, Aaron. I know we had a really exciting day yesterday where we went through Your Food is a Weapon series. I'm really excited to continue that. If you all are new here, Aaron is going to be joining us as he shows us his process on editing and animating food photos in both Photoshop and Lightroom. And fun fact, again, he is a former Adobe creative resident. So really excited for you to be back, Aaron. How did you feel after yesterday?
Oh, good. I learned a few new things last night. I can't wait to share. But I feel refreshed and ready to look at bananas again for a few hours.
I know it seems like the chat really loved the banana aspect of yesterday. So really excited to see how everyone kind of enjoys today's session and picking up where we left off. Just a couple of announcements before we get started. Want to make sure that you guys check out the creative encore of the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge with Voodoo Val. It's every weekday at 9 a.m. Pacific. And then tune in and take your Photoshop skills to the next level. And so also another announcement as well, if you are over on YouTube, make your way over to Behance, okay? We want you guys to join the conversation. We see the chat is already going crazy. Everyone is saying hello. So make your way to Behance. It is b.net/Adobe Live. So that way you can join the conversation. I'm just gonna quickly look in the chat to see who we have here. I see Cody is back. We have Andreas who's here, Megan, Anika, who else? Sean, I remember Sean specifically. I think, was it Sean that had he had all the banana jokes yesterday? Or maybe it was somebody.
I think you're right.
So welcome everybody and welcome back, Aaron. If you don't mind, if you can give us a quick introduction of who you are, your work, it'd be great to introduce the crowd to you today.
Of course. Hello, everyone, and hello again to some of you. My name is Aaron Bernstein, and I am a still life and food photographer. I'm based in New York City. As you can see, most all of my work is in studio, and what draws me to food is the just color opportunities and color relationships that you can form and the stories that you can tell with food, as well as like the textural opportunities that are there. So a lot of my work is super clean, messy, but in a very controlled way, sort of exploring the visual dynamics of food, but also in the context of culture and what food means to people. I think it's like a very universal subject, but also very subjective. And so I like to literally play with my food and push what people think about, traditional meals and ingredients.
Awesome. It's funny because we were told as kids, like, don't play with your food, but now
it's all I do.
It's all you do. I love this gummy bear. I really like the hot dog one that you showed with like, was it grass or?
Yeah, they're like cattails.
Yes.
I find it
that one was really nice.
Thank you.
I'm even hungry.
I am too. So we'll see how we get through today.
Awesome. Yeah, this is it's just so unique and like, so how did you get, quick question, how did you get, well, how did you shoot this? And how did you get like the mustard, the ketchup, the relish and everything situated?
Kind of similar to what we were working on yesterday. I shot this in a lot of bits and pieces and in layers. So I focused on like getting the right sunset-y feel for the background, that gradient. And then I had a bunch of fake cattails that I bought and actually like stripped off the part that you usually see, and like rigged up a bunch of the hot dogs to take their place. And then from there, with the actual condiments, I just let gravity do its thing. Some of them worked more successfully. Some of these are comped on. I was shot, either shot them from above or directly on the floating hot dogs, just like very quickly with the timer before it all fell. And then in post, I just, shot a lot of the grass blades individually to place them as needed. I almost use this for live to walk through. So maybe in the future I can walk us through this process, because it was a long one, but it was fun.
Oh, awesome. I would love that. Awesome. So yes, we have a lot going on today. Aaron, what do we have planned? And we're going to pick up where we left off yesterday.
We are.
Awesome. I'm really excited. If you all, let's see if we have any questions in the chat. If you guys have any questions throughout our live stream today, please drop them in the chat. That way you have Aaron here. You have access to him to answer any questions that you have. So please go ahead and drop them in the chat. But welcome to you. I'm really excited to kind of continue where we left off yesterday.
Me too. So I can go ahead and switch over to Photoshop.
Awesome. And while you do that, another thing, make sure you guys go ahead and follow Aaron on social media. Check out his website that he just pulled up. And then also make sure you follow him on Instagram as well. If anyone wants to be kindly enough to drop that in the chat, that way it's easy access for everybody, that'd be great. But want to make sure y'all following his work as well. So awesome. Thank you, Aaron. Go ahead, take it away.
Thank you. So yesterday we started this journey of morphing this pair of bananas down here into these nunchucks. It's a series that I've been working on just about food being a weapon, and this inspiration from this idea that things aren't always what they seem. And I was really interested in showing how to get from point A to point B, and actually like manipulating the bananas, showing every step of the way into the nunchucks, sort of in like very Animorphs vibe. For those of you that are old enough to know what I'm talking about, that's glad that you're here. For those that don't, look it up, it's super cool. So we kind of left off with all of our base shapes all set up, and now we're kind of ready to go in and start manipulating the colors and the shades to make them match a little closer to those final like dark nunchucks. I also went in last night, I kind of cheated and like cleaned up the chain a little and like some of the shapes, just so that we didn't have to sit through any of that today. So I'm pretty much ready to go.
Exciting.
The one thing that I wanted to show you, Adara, last night, and Sean, hopefully you're still here, but I learned about this banana tool.
Did you?
Yeah, so if you go into your toolbar and then you just hold down Shift and you click done, this banana pops up. And it's just like an Easter egg tool, I guess, that I've never heard about. It doesn't do anything. It truly is just like a placeholder for that like ellipses to get to your toolbar menu. So now we're on theme, and now we're ready for the day.
I'm so glad you looked into that, because I just was thinking after the live yesterday, like, what the heck is this banana tool? Like,
I know. I
thought it was made up, and they kept mentioning it. So Sean, we figured out what the banana tool is. So thank you for mentioning that yesterday.
Yes, apparently there's also a monkey tool layer thing out there as well, which I did not explore, but maybe next time.
Maybe next time. And if you guys missed yesterday's live, you can catch that on either the Creative Cloud YouTube channel, or also on Behance. So in that way, if you want to see the process that led up to where we're at now, you can refer back to that to make sure you don't miss anything. We want to make sure you get all the information.
All the banana information.
Awesome.
Okay, shall we dive in?
Let's dive in.
All right, so I think today, whereas we kind of worked forwards yesterday from the base pair to focusing on those shapes and going one at a time, you can sort of see here, we went in one at a time and like slowly morphed to get those shapes. We're actually going to start from this pair today and work our way backwards to try to see like what that final step might be before getting to those nunchucks, and then duplicating those layers out to the rest of these pairs, but like decreasing their opacity to give it that like gradation effect. So first things first, we just have to figure out the best thing to do to these to get them. So I think the first thing that I would do is hue saturation, and I'm gonna apply these only onto, I put everything in folders just so that I could like keep these masks specific to whatever is contained in the folder. And then that way I also didn't have to flatten these together yet, just in case I still wanted to tweak, you know,
placement or anything.
Placement or any of that. I also just accidentally turned that down. So I think looking just like at this, if I completely desaturate it, I see that it's still like, there's still like a big jump it feels, especially in tone, but it does get me, I think, at a good place with just like that. I think it should be black and white pretty much right before that jump. And then I feel like I'm pushing this a lot more than I usually would. Like, I feel like I never touch the lightness sliding tool in hue saturation, just because it usually appears so unnatural to me. But we're kind of working in reverse where I'm going for an unnatural look anyway, so why not play around and see what happens. And then I'm just gonna switch over to the yellows channel specifically because obviously these bananas are yellow and that's like the main tone. And I'm also just gonna bring this down as well. Because I think like that's starting to give me something closer to, you know, what I want to match in those tones. So even that already is like pretty easy and good fix. And then I'm also gonna apply levels, and I'm actually gonna come in here and try to match closer to these metal tones with these tips. And so I'm gonna like push my highlights and maybe increase the contrast, shifting those midtones a little to, I'm only focusing on the tips of the bananas right now, just to get something that's a little bit closer. And I think we'll start here. And so I'll just go ahead and reverse that mask and then just go in and manually paint to only reveal for the tips. And then from here, that's looking pretty good. I feel like it's part of the image that people don't really notice unless I call it out. So I feel pretty good about that. I'm just gonna go in and do a few tweaks. I notice I have some like spillover that I can clone out over here to smooth this out a little bit more.
Yeah, it's that attention to detail.
It is that attention to detail, which adds up. I'm also just gonna go ahead and copy my mask over from this levels onto a curves. I like to combine them. I think it's just habit. Sometimes I feel like I can push the values a little bit more with curves in a different way that I can with levels, or vice versa. Because I feel like I kind of maxed out that levels adjustment. I can now go in with curves and maybe just make it overall a little bit brighter to try to like really get that brightness. And that looks actually a little too bright to me. So maybe I'll even just play with the opacity. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty good.
Yes.
But now that I brought that up, I realize I have this like slight border on this banana. And since I destructively applied my initial layer mask, I can't smudge it like we were doing yesterday with the outline. So I'm just gonna go in with a pretty defined brush, very small, and just sort of get rid of those edges a little bit more. So we have just something a little less distracting. I think even that honestly might do the trick. I'm gonna do the same on this guy as well.
Yeah, just clean that up a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So that is feeling like a solid jumping off point. I think looking at this as a whole, I'm still like getting a little bit of this texture down here in the actual banana. And so I kind of want to play around with evening that out just to match these nunchucks more. So while I'm here, I'm going to do the same thing to that final top layer just to get rid of this. Actually, I'll come back to that. I gotta stay in my lane. I gotta focus on these guys. But I think I'm just gonna do a solid color overlay and maybe pull out one of these dark values from the darkest area down here. was working a lot with cyan right before this. And honestly, I might even I'm gonna keep it over only obviously the selection, and I might even just paint this in. Very soft brush just to sort of like flatten it out. I don't want to lose that overlap though. So I think the priority really is just that top banana to make sure that we're getting like a decent effect with it.
Yeah.
It's a little extreme. Okay. That's feeling like a better jump.
Yes, from bananas to nunchucks.
Exactly. And maybe I might, because I know I just literally like painted on top of this, so maybe I'll change it to a luminosity overlay so that there's still like a little detail coming through instead of just like
it just being black.
Me, exactly. But I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, that looks really good.
While I'm here, I'm gonna just get rid of this edge that's overlapping as well on the nunchuck, since this is like, you can see it's kind of around the whole thing.
Yeah.
I might just create a completely black layer and change this to color so that it also is just neutralizing the color of the handles. But then, because I feel like it reads black and white and some of this red would actually be reflected in the chain, I am just gonna go ahead and mask out that part to keep some of that warmth in those details. So we are hitting the ground running today with this, but I think we'll work through it pretty quickly and then we will move on to a new one. There we go. I accidentally deleted that. Gorgeous.
Yes,
so
that's really
feeling
nice.
Pretty good.
So we went through hue and saturation, adjusted the levels, curves, and color fill to kind of get them where we wanted them to be.
Yeah. And I just went in and neutralized the handles a little bit to clean up that like red fringe around the edge. Right, so now knowing that we have that, you know, it's looking obviously like a very extreme jump because we haven't applied any effects yet. So I think I'm just gonna copy these over one at a time by duplicating them, applying them to the next layer. Of course, when I do that, I lose everything that's linked. But now I can maybe play around with going,
okay.
I think I'll keep this on 80, but then I can start playing around with maybe bringing some of these values up a little bit more and seeing like what feels like a good jumping off point. I'm gonna go ahead and actually just copy all. I think maybe I'll copy these over first just to like make sure that like each step is a good minor adjustment from the next. So maybe I'll start bringing in some color here. Try raising it by like 10 just to see what happens. And after that, I will go in because it's appearing a little green to me when you like compare it to the next step. So we can go back in and add a little bit more. Oops. So many layers. It's as organized as I can be.
Yeah, it's good. That's why it's good that you labeled as much as you did yesterday, because there's so many layers. So many.
So I can already tell because I think I'm not going to apply any modifications to this first one. But I do think that it like jumps pretty much between the first two. So I might even just reset this one and find something that's a little more subtle. Maybe it's even just about the yellows here, bringing that down like.
Yeah. And we have a question for you.
Sure.
Sean asked, do you use a black and white layer to see values?
I do. I do sometimes. And I also use black and whites for luminosity. Sometimes I'll force it that way where I'm using black and white adjustments. But if it's on that luminosity layer, then I can like push the red values brighter or darker or the yellows. And I found that to be like a really effective trick when I'm only like focusing on like one portion of the image, or, you know, really controlling like specific tones.
Yeah.
So I am just now going to like, that's starting to feel a little better, but maybe I'll like go back into some of these and just try to like bring the gaps closer in from each jump. Just double check it with the one before to make sure that I'm not like, that I'm staying consistent. I actually think pretty happy with that. So now what I can do is I can, let's see, where are we? The fifth one. Just again, go back in and focus on just the tips to get that metal effect.
Got it. So it just seems like it's a lot of trial and error until you get exactly what you want.
Exactly. And again, we're kind of like cheating a bit because I am like recreating a final piece. So like to get this formula, it did take a minute for me to figure out like what worked best with, you know, figuring out the right adjustments and whatnot. But I also think like it's so, the adjustment layers are so intuitive and there's so many like ways that you can approach it to get what you need, that like, again, there's hardly ever a wrong answer. It's just figuring out what approach is best for you and like how you're most comfortable working. So we would have gotten there one way or the other. I think that's all I'm going to do for the tips, just because I feel like down here they're still pretty bright and I wanted that to be a really subtle transition. But I am going to then now go in and maybe on each one pull out a color, kind of similar to what we did with the first one. Picking up one of these slightly more muted dark tones. But this time, well, I guess we don't actually need to do that yet, but maybe this time we'll keep it like a little, maybe at like 60%.
Yeah.
And we'll just also paint it in with a slightly softer brush just to simplify and start to just see these more as shapes and less as bananas. So I'm just going to turn off these other layers.
How long did it take you, if you remember, from when you first did this image to get the formula that you wanted?
It took a few hours of figuring it out. And I think kind of like we were talking about yesterday, like sometimes you just have to walk away once you think you're on to something. And so I like set the base, but then it was a lot of like tweaking and just like probably unnecessarily, but like going back in and just really like making sure. I think I even like spaced out like numerically like very even increments between everything. Today I'm just sort of like going in and doing it by feel and look, because how I usually work. But I wanted to make sure that the jumps were like as even as they could be and as least distracting as they could be. So it definitely took a while.
see what we have going on the chat. Oh, Cody said, "Oh no, I just dripped sauce on my keyboards. Big mistake." Oh, sorry, Cody. They said they said I had to eat something during the Hungry Boy stream today. I was way too hungry yesterday. Cody, if you can hear my stomach growling, I am sorry. But seeing but I have bananas in the kitchen, so
hopefully it's not scarring.
Yeah.
I'm also now going in just directly with the burn tool on the shadows, and where I feel like this luminosity layer is not, you know, doing as much as it could, I'm just gonna like directly burn in some parts of the bananas.
Got it.
Again, I'm like not too worried about image destruction, especially because I know at this point like they're pretty dark and pretty muted, so I know that I can be a little bit more forceful than usual with them. So I'm also just going to go in and get rid of some of this texture that's still showing through, just to give us a better idea, to get that like cleaner look. I think that makes sense. So that's looking pretty good. Now this one is tricky because it does, I think just by default, like that really desaturated yellow just really does read so green to me. So I do wonder if I don't think that there's going to be like a huge way around it, because I do think that we need some of that variation. So I think this is where I need to learn to let go. I think I'll just
let go
and trust in what you did. Down. Exactly. And then again with this texture, maybe I'll go on with my clone stamp on a very low opacity just to like minimize that contrast a little bit. Again, now that we're getting like closer to the original pair of bananas, like it might help, and like we might want some of that. And so I'm just gonna like ever so slightly minimize it so that it's not jumping so much. Now that I look at this one too, I might even bring this down to 50 and this down to 90. No, that's not good. 95, that looks better. Just so that I think that'll help tie in these like greenish tones as well. And with these guys, I think I might just leave them because
I like the transition that
we gotta get there. And then now I can just kind of go in and maybe like tone down the adjustment layers a little bit, just so that it's feeling a little smoother. Now, of course, that I have them all in a row, I see like this pair is reading a little bright to me, so maybe I can just darken this up. I need to darken this one. But I'm thinking that's pretty good.
It looks pretty solid. I'm
happy with that. I'm gonna save it. Something I was not doing yesterday, saving as we're going.
I noticed that yesterday. I think you would do like the individual layers, and then you would just like discard.
Yeah, as soon as I know, as soon as we logged off, I was like, well, that was just me not thinking.
Good thing everything else, was good to go. You didn't need to refer back to any of that.
Yeah, I was like, let's just make sure that we're saving today. I think overall composition wise, like I feel pretty good. I might just like skew these a little bit more. I kind of like how each of the ends are intersecting with the next pair in front. So I think just try to line this one up a little bit more. And then as a whole, I just think I'm going to leave a little bit more negative space around the image to give it room to breathe, because I know it's very hard to digest, no pun intended, or like not maybe as familiar with what you're looking at first. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm like centered and that feels good. And from here, I know I kind of just pulled this red tone from the seamless that everything was shot on. So maybe I want to play a little bit around with like
the color.
Yeah, like maybe just getting something a little bit more vibrant. And I think maybe even like a little orange here kind of makes it pop a little bit more versus this red. I think it kind of like complements those bananas a little bit more. I don't know what the proper name would be for this shade, but it's like a reddishy, orangey. I think it's only orange in the context of comparing it to like this.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I like that shade a lot.
something like that is cool. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And then from here, once I'm like happy with everything, which I think I am, I'm just gonna create a new folder. I always call it adjust. It's just overall adjustment layers where I can then now go in. Maybe I use selective color a lot too to alter tones. And so especially with like my darkest black points, which I know over here, maybe I can just up those a little bit to make like this pair a little less distracting, and maybe this one, without losing any of that like overlap or that.
Selective color is my probably because I do a lot of color grading in general, and so selective color is my favorite adjustment layer, because it's just like there's so much you can do to impact the tones in your image.
Oh, it's also one that I feel like I learned later in life just by like poking around. I feel like I used to like use color balance so much and play around with its blending mode, and like it was never as like as perfect as I wanted it. And so it was only in the last couple of years that I found this and could start using it in a much more refined way. I was like, man, I wish I
Same. I had a friend that showed it to me. They're like, oh, you don't use selective color? And I'm like, no, what's that? I'm like, wait, no, I don't feel like one of the cool kids. Like, what's
right? Well, now between that and the banana tool, you're set.
Come on. Like, I feel like I'm good to go.
Exactly. I'm just gonna tweak the tones and the neutral values a little bit too, just to sort of like minimize that green that I can't seem to
stop looking at.
Yeah, but even that, you can see it kind of helps, especially when we get to like this guy. I think that's looking better. I'm pretty happy with that. Maybe I'll just brightness.
How are you guys in the chat feeling about this final image, the banana to the nunchucks? I want to see what
you can be honest.
I'm loving it. I'm loving the transition, especially going from the bright yellow and you seeing the change in opacity to the black. It's a nice transition.
Those look pretty good with the overall adjustments too, just to let it pop a little bit. One last thing that I'll do. So this would be it in like black and white, obviously. I can show you guys what I was talking about a little bit, setting this luminosity. These are like the default values that it gives you, but you can see how that's already like altering the tones of like the red and the yellow. But sometimes I'll go in here, let's say I wanted like a really like a richer, darker red, and maybe I want to like brighten the yellows up a lot or something, which I don't really want to do in this case, but I can see now that maybe like I can deepen that red a little bit more than what it is. So maybe like something like that is nice. If it feels like too much, maybe I can like bump it down a little bit just to like give it a little something else. I don't think that I'm actually, and then sometimes I'll even go back and I'll look at that in black and white just to see what then now the tonal range is in black and white, and just to confirm that like, okay, I did bring those yellows a little bit forward and to contrast a little bit more with the red at the background. So maybe like this is something that I do want to include, but a more subtle level, maybe even a little bit less. Yeah, I think that is where we're going to leave it with this.
Yes.
And then from here, I know I mentioned yesterday, and this is like a very quick thing, but just animating this and bringing this to life so that we could see each step. So I do a lot of stop motion work in my day-to-day career and my job, and a lot of it just stemmed from wanting to create moving images but being too afraid to create movies, and kind of just never moved beyond photo. So when I am doing something like this, I always think about the opportunities that are there to showcase this in a different way. And I think, like I mentioned yesterday, even if it's not like for the final product, sometimes it's just cool for like process or showing, you know, the step by step. So animating in Photoshop is,
now this is what I'm excited about.
yeah, it's usually what I will do. The amount of times that I've like opened After Effects and sat there and have tried to learn,
that's why I asked the question yesterday. I was like, what do you do the animation in? Because my brain goes to After Effects, and that's not my ministry.
Sure.
I don't touch After Effects at all.
It's definitely like, I taught myself in everything initially, and I mean basically just in Photoshop, especially as a teenager. Like I lived in Photoshop and I never ventured beyond. And then when I went to school for photography and started like taking proper classes, I still kind of stayed in that lane, and I'm like, I should have branched out a little and learned After Effects, because now I just feel like it's too late. So, so everything's in Photoshop. But basically in Window, you can open the timeline, and usually it gives you the option of now creating a video timeline, because you can actually work with video clips in Photoshop. But you can also do something called frame animation. And basically you're setting, you can manually set the length of time of each frame, and basically whatever layers are on are what's going to be in view on that particular frame. So a lot of my work that is stop motion, I will do using Photoshop and the frame animation timeline. And I think what's different about what I tried to do with it versus other stop motion animators is that I like the studio light and the very controlled light that I use to keep things very contrasty but bright, and very straightforward and simple. And so this way I can sort of also animate my adjustment layers, or just pair them with certain things to keep that control throughout the whole thing. So sometimes it can get very complex and it's too much, but it always works eventually. So as a start, I think I'm just going to set each frame to be like 0.35 seconds, so almost like a third of a second. And I think so basically all we have to do is the whole time I'm going to keep on the adjustment layer. So I'm just going to lock that in right now, as well as the background. But I can turn off every other layer to know to kind of start blank. I do think I want to maybe start with the base. And also actually just to like help keep this clean, I'm just now gonna put another folder with each grouping so that I don't have to worry about like turning on and off the wrong layer. And I'm just gonna, like, for the sake of time, very simply number these for frames. So that should give us our 6.
Got it. Awesome.
This way, we're good. So in order to just create a new frame, you can I just like to duplicate the frame, because it will leave what you had toggled on before, but now I can add to it and now turn on folder 2, which of course I turned everything. But I can now just go back in, and then we can already start to see as we click through, like, now I can show this. Maybe I'll actually keep this off though, so that we transform one at a time. So I'll do the same thing for each grouping. Just kind of going in, turning on the next folders and all of the masks to make sure that it looks just like the still. I guess I should turn on.
Yeah, and Cody said that they loved the Photoshop timeline because it's simple and straightforward, and even just with what you're showing us now, it looks so straightforward.
It's super straightforward, and you can like use this tool to tween between frames, which sort of just like helps the animation sometimes. But for as long as I can remember, when I started using Photoshop and poking around, like, this timeline has always existed. I think like the video timeline was a later integration when you know, working with actual video clips became more and more popular. But this has always sort of been here in some degree, and so it's something that I've been playing around with for years. And it is so simple, and it is sort of timeless in that way. And I'm happy that they haven't gotten rid of it.
Yes.
Hopefully they never will. So now we have our base frames and we can play it through. It's going to take a minute to load just because it's working with so many different layers, but we can see that like transition, and we can see that everything is like evenly timed right now. But for the sake of clarity, let's say like I want to set this last frame to 1 second and this first frame to 1 second so that we really see, you know, what we're starting with. And then it's more of like a blip to the final result. I can also duplicate the frames that I've already made. So let's say I want this to be like a continuous loop forever. I can just select these middle frames, use that same duplicate tool, move them after this, and then using this, I can just reverse the order that they're going in. So now it will build up.
And then it'll go back.
And then it will go back. So it's like very simple, something like very easy that people can start playing around with if they're interested in animating, with just like even looking at like their layer masks, and you can show step by step of how you're editing a still. You can also, if you change the opacity of something on one frame, you can increase it or decrease it on the next one. Which I've always found really interesting. So you can like create a really smooth like toggle on and off feature of like going from an unedited image to a final instead of just jumping back and forth. So
I like that a lot. I think that's something that I might take and add to my workflow, because I usually, in general, especially when I share my work on Instagram, I love to show like the before and afters, but it can kind of get a little boring to just show like, you know, before and then after. Whereas I like using animation as a way to like show the progress of the edit. So that could be a really cool idea that I might, you know, put into my back pocket.
Yeah. And of course, there are so many ways that you could do that with like the video timeline and having the final and your initial, and like creating a gradual opacity in that way to go back and forth. But this is like a good place to start, especially I think if you're newer to it. Just it's not intimidating, and you can get whatever you need out of it. And then to export it, so if you wanted like a video for Instagram, for example, you just go export render video, and you can set whatever, you know, you can make presets. This is probably gonna freeze my computer because it's such a big file because I was working for it for print, but you can, you know, make it a QuickTime file. You can set your own ratio. You can set the number of frames per second. It's nice because you are manually pausing and unpausing the frames for a certain amount of time, so it will stay true to that, which is really, really nice. But yeah, that's how you can get like a video file out of that. That's like a very, very high level look, quick glance into it, but just something that I think is something to consider and something to keep in your back pocket.
Yes, absolutely. I'm definitely gonna play around with that after this live today. It's just a way to make your work look so much more, you know, intriguing, and just kind of add a different element than what you're used to seeing.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we can call this one done. Yay. Which I don't think I've ever done on Adobe Live before.
Wait, we're missing the actual nunchucks in this animation.
Are we? Oh no.
I just realized.
You're so right. Thank you.
We stopped at the banana.
Okay, I'm like, oh, we did it. Let me add that in.
Yay, awesome. And while you do that, Cody, thank you for pointing this out. Later, we will be doing an artist spotlight. So if you would like to nominate yourself or someone else for a feature spotlight, feel free to fill out the form. You will see it in the chat. If you look where it says like chat info, you'll see where it says artist spotlight. So you can make those nominations there.
Awesome. Okay, now it's done, I promise.
There we go.
We go. Just gonna close out of this timeline for now. Turn this all back on to give us that final image and save it.
Yay.
Make sure that we're all saved. All right, that is that. Are there any questions before we move on to another composition.
Yes. If y'all have any questions about any of the editing we've done thus far, the animation, drop them in the chat before we move forward. We'll give it like another, maybe a minute or two to see if there's any questions that pop up before we move forward. But what was your favorite part about this, the banana to nunchuck concept? Was it shooting? Is it the detail in the editing? Is it the animation?
I think in this case, and we touched on it a little bit yesterday, just with like how sterile it felt to actually shoot everything. It definitely wasn't in the actual photography part for this project. I think it was obviously like seeing the final result is very satisfying, just and like that relief to know that it worked in some way and that I could make it work. And so I think even just that journey of like figuring out the best way to manipulate the shape and getting those tones right and getting the colors right was really satisfying. I think the part that was most frustrating, or that still is to me, is just like, because everything is so static and isolated, getting that composition to look good and like to look like a smooth transition without getting too cluttered, and maybe creating like some real movement with these just in the static image was very, very challenging. So it's definitely like an area that I think with this project was a really good challenge for me to take on and play around with.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just crazy how creative, you can get. Just bringing an idea to life is what I usually just love about any art in general, to see how you went from literally shooting the different. I think the most impressive part for me is the actual like chains that you edited yesterday, because I saw how you had to, at least plan ahead for that when you were shooting, to get the different angles of the chain, so that way you could later connect them. I think because the way it looks now, it looks literally like this is what you shot, not knowing that you had to piece together all of this. So it's incredibly creative.
Mostly my impatience on set, but thank you. Sometimes it's nice to create those fun little challenges too, just to like push your skills and use them in new ways that you usually don't have to.
And then you get to see how powerful a lot of these tools are. When you challenge yourself in that way, you're like, oh wait, I knew that I could use this, these different steps or these different tools to get a certain result, but I didn't know I could push it that far.
For sure.
For full manipulation. So awesome. Well, I think we're ready to continue on. I'm excited to see what we do next. So what do we have next for?
So I think next I'll go back into Lightroom, and this time we will go from Popsicles to Dynamite. Again, when I shot these, it was the dead of summer, and so it was very hot in the studio, and this way I knew that I could like eat the popsicles after. I think I actually still have some left over in my freezer from this project. So
now, why Dynamite?
I think it's actually one of the first things that I thought about when I was brainstorming my list of weapons and pulling from like very cartoony references and thinking about like the Looney Tunes and what sort of things that they would use, just because I didn't want this project to feel scary or too modern either. Like I wanted it to just sort of be this obscure, nondescript reference to things that we can recognize as weapons, but maybe that we don't, see in everyday like television shows or movies or whatever. And so Dynamite, I just really love like the simplicity of the shape of it and the color, and I thought that there was a lot of good opportunity there with the three tubes taped together, and figuring out what sort of food I could mimic that with and sort of transform to get to that shape.
Got it.
Yeah. So I bought this, like, I think it was from like a Halloween store for some sort of costume, like very plasticky, cheap Dynamite set. And when it came, you can sort of see like, you can see all of the seams, which I knew that luckily it's like, oh, I can make this look good. But these strings, like the actual, like, I guess, wicks that
Mm-hmm.
you would light were just, I knew that there wasn't going to be any easier way to get them in the shape that I wanted without again having to like piece everything together, kind of similar to what we did with the nunchucks. So I again like shot that element separately, just playing around with tying them up, and then I think I was just like twisting and manipulating the base of it until I found a shape that I knew would work. So that was like these are my two base pieces that we'll put together for the Dynamite. And then with the popsicles, you know, in looking at popsicles in the store, like I knew that they came in this way, almost like, you know, with the indents in the middle. And I thought that there was a really interesting to me at least, like story there with with the texture of it, and that idea that maybe they could separate into something like these individual ice pops that you also see in the store. And so I shot the popsicle, like the main popsicles. I bought everything in strawberry flavor. I think the same brand, even just to make sure that it was like the same color and same texture. And I just shot it at all different sorts of angles, holding it, not really worrying about the stick, because I knew that I would eventually probably lose the stick to get it super monochrome, and so that I could like more forcefully manipulate the shape to get into this. And so I just ended up shooting the stick separately that I could then add on to the popsicle to create that full effect.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then with these, I, as you can see, just threw a rubber band around them because I could not figure out a better way for them to stick together. I tried so many things, and stupidly I was like, well, of course this doesn't work. Like they're freezing cold. I can't glue them. I can't really freeze them together because then they turn into a blob. And so I was like, this I can work with.
Yeah.
So that's what we ended up with.
Awesome. I'm excited. And Clever said this is very cherry bomb pop.
It
So
definitely
there
is.
you go. There is a nice play on words there.
Exactly. So I did this step ahead of time just to save us some time today, but similar to yesterday, I can show you guys too. I went in and I did my initial adjustments in Lightroom on the develop panel, just sort of playing around with, you know, bringing up the shadows a little bit and bringing down those black values, adjusting that, my favorite, the clarity slider, just to make it a little bit crisper. I think especially when you're working with something so smooth, like it's important to get those like really defined edges in the highlights and shadows, but then also in something that I know I'm going to isolate, getting it around the overall image as a whole. And then just like pushing up that vibrance just a little bit to make it pop a little bit more. So once I had those settings all good into my liking to keep it consistent across the board.
Copy and paste them across the board, yeah.
Exactly. And then I could just choose which ones I wanted. So I'm going to keep the crop off, for example, in this, since I went in and manually just cropped into what I wanted. But I knew that I basically just made these basic corrections for this because I know that I'll finesse it more later in Photoshop. So I just am going to copy those over to my full range over here. And then you'll see these loading.
Beautiful. And if you guys, again, if you are watching or just joining this live, really excited to go and see how we can transform the popsicles into the Dynamite. A part of Aaron's Food is a Weapon series. But if you are over on YouTube, make your way over to Behance so that way you can join the conversation. You can chat, ask questions, talk to everybody else. And so that is b.net/Adobe Live, so that way you can have some fun and join the conversation with us.
Yeah. So I'm just going to go ahead and export these as final files to be able to then start manipulating with. Again, a tip from yesterday, you can export multiple images at a time, and you can apply all the same settings. So in this case, I'm going to rename the files and that in, and then add a sequence number so that it'll label them. I guess I will just keep these in the raw format because why not? And I can go ahead and start to open these in Photoshop. to begin again.
And here we go.
Here we go. I was like, maybe. There we go. And again, like when you're opening, because I exported it as a raw file, it saved the sidecar file, if you will, with all of those settings that I set in Lightroom. So in case you want to change anything or adjust anything before you open that final image, you can do so. So it very non-destructively copied those settings over. Great. And then I will just go ahead and open this other guy as well.
So we're going to start with the Dynamite.
So we're going to start with the Dynamite. So we have the two parts, right? We have the body, if you will, and then we have the top, the stem. I think I'm like wig. I should have looked up the word. The feed. I like the feed.
I can't help you there.
Yeah, it's all good.
Help you there.
I'm not sure. So I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate the layer, and I'm going to begin by isolating just this body. So something that we were doing yesterday a lot was using color range, which is just like a very easy way for me to select that background color. Again, you can change. I noticed if I go a little too wide of a selection, it starts to pick up some of these highlights. Since I'm going for like a creamier background with this, I thought that it would like really accentuate the reds of the final Dynamite sticks, and then also like of the Popsicle. So I wanted something maybe also in the greater series, like a little visual break with the background colors being so vibrant. And then you can go ahead and hold down Shift too if you want to select a little bit more of those background tones to get it all in one. And then I'll just go ahead and apply an adjustment layer. That adjustment, I can see like it's pretty good, but there's some things that I want to keep in. So I'll just go in and paint.
Paint those back in.
Yeah. I guess I actually don't need to worry too much about whatever we're going to call those today, because
what are they called? If anyone in the chat knows, like, are they, because I was saying wicks.
I was too, and I was like, is it a candle? Is it I have no idea.
I'm like, they call them wicks on candles, so I mean, is it not a similar concept here, or?
Right.
Oh, fuse?
That makes more sense.
That makes more sense, yeah.
That's better than wig. Oops. To just make sure that I have like a really clean edge. I don't know why I'm going to do this, but I'm going to use the pen tool. It's like something that I'm still kind of afraid of using, but I like still can't wrap my head around it, but we're going to try it today. I don't really know how to talk through this because I feel like I don't use it correctly, but it works for me. I will use it a lot when I'm trying to get like a very smooth curve of something, just because I feel like the selection, even if I'm losing some of this image information, like that's totally okay with me. I know it's better than me freehanding with my mouse.
Yeah.
I've tried so many times to use a tablet. It's just not for me. So here we are. And I guess I should be painting on the adjustment layer mask, not the actual image in blue.
And just clean. Oh, so Cody confirmed it's fuse is the right word.
Okay, cool.
So light the fuse. Good to know. Good to know.
That makes total sense. See, even we're learning.
Exactly. You guys learn a little bit. We learn a little bit. It's a win-win situation.
So I'm just going to go ahead and chop the top of the fuses off in this case, since I know that will bring them in from the other image. Which I will do so now by duplicating this over to this initial file. And then maybe before I isolate, I'm just going to try to line these up a little bit. And it actually looks like my perspective is flipped here to get like, it looks like it's like right heavy on this new one, but it's more centered on this other one. So I might even try flipping this to see if it lines up a little bit better. I also with this like wanted to give myself the safety net that I'm now running into now of it having not exactly line up where they intersect with the tubes. And so making sure that my perspective on this was straight on so that we don't see the top of the sticks at all, will work in my favor, and we can kind of just place them wherever we need. I don't think it like visually makes too big of a difference.
No.
Nobody will. You guys will know, but like nobody will.
Like how would they know?
Exactly. Exactly. Now I am haunted by TikTok trends.
Not me dropping that to see if you would know it's a TikTok trend.
I'm picking up on that. It's been like my biggest pandemic habit that I've picked up. It's just like such mindless comfort and
oh my goodness.
Unfortunately. But sometimes I see like really cool like photo editing tricks or behind the scenes of shoots, and I'm like, all right, this is definitely tailored towards me, which I appreciate.
There's so much you can really like. There's the entertainment aspect of TikTok where like I can really get lost for hours if I'm not careful. But there is a lot that you can learn as well. So there's a lot there. I
try to keep it as like a end of day reward as much as I can. Where I will, I'm like, all right, I get through my day and I can like decompress for better or for worse. But so I'm just going ahead in this as well and doing the exact same thing that I was doing with the base of it, using that color range to select and clean up the, I was gonna call them wires, fuses. Just sort of very roughly painting around.
You didn't miss anything.
Yeah. Some of that in for safety for now. We can kind of start to see how it will come together. And it's kind of hard to tell, like I know on the highlights in these fuses, like I can see in here that they're not, that some of that was messed up as well, but it's kind of hard to see here. So I might even just turn on my quick mask to go ahead and add those back in. Just make anything that I don't want red and want to be in the image not red anymore. And I think like, I know like I could just as easily have like gotten rid of all of the highlights and just made these like very dark fuses, but then I think we would lose some of that very important detail and like the overlap of everything, and making sure that those look as natural and like poppy as possible.
It's nice to keep the realistic and have that attention to detail.
Yeah.
It makes it look more real and not too like Photoshoppy.
Exactly. Yeah, because I think the other option with this too would definitely be like you could even probably draw them where you want them, but I mean, you really use a pen tool to select, so I don't know how I would think about that. Also, I know talking about like where these line up with these pipes, I'm just gonna warp manually where these go. I might even stretch these. Get rid of overlapping with the base. I'm on the right brush. There we go.
Wow.
To be extra safe, I can even throw it behind this layer and then just continue to adjust it until it's good. Since this is taller now, I guess I will need to add some more to my canvas to make sure that we have everything in.
There we go.
But that's looking pretty good. This does make sense to come from the center a little bit more. Looks, I'm pretty happy with that. And so now I think it's just a matter of continuing to clean these up.
Mm-hmm.
See, like, because it was so cheap and plasticky, like there's a lot of like little dust spots. It also helps me realize where maybe I forgot to mask a little bit as I just
Yeah.
go in with like the clone and the spot healing.
I'm just gonna clean that
just
up.
to clean
Yeah.
these up a little bit more. So as a portrait photographer, are you retouching skin a lot, I would assume?
Yeah, I am. Well, it depends. So a lot of the times, if I'm doing more like, I guess it just more so depends on if I'm doing something that's more editorial or something that's more lifestyle. If I'm doing something that's more lifestyle, like I'm not doing too much skin retouching, sometimes I can just get away with using like the spot tool to take away like something really noticeable.
Sure.
But one of my biggest goals about 2 years ago was to like learn a lot about skin retouching, and I needed to use like, because it's kind of difficult. I don't know how you're doing all of this with like just your hand, because my hand tends to. Are you using just a mouse?
Yeah.
Yeah, my hand cramps up.
That's fair.
But I don't. I also don't like. Not that I don't like. I struggle with using tablets.
Me too.
I have a what's it called, a Wacom tablet, and I struggle with that. What I have been doing, and I've added to my workflow that works a lot works really well, is I have an iPad, and if I use it as a like a second monitor, I can drag Photoshop over onto my iPad and use my Apple Pencil to edit.
Oh, sure.
So it's a lot easier to like know where because my issue with the Wacom tablet is I can't really like see what even though I'm looking at the screen and I'm looking down. You get what I mean? Like,
completely relate. I've tried so many times and I'm like, this isn't computing. If I can't be directly on top of the image, then I can't.
Exactly. So I like using my iPad because I can be directly on top of the image and go ahead and do that editing. But skin retouching, I do. It just tends to get a bit tedious at times.
Yes.
And it's just you have to pay attention to so much detail, making sure that, the skin still looks realistic, that you're not blurring out someone's face and making them look like not themselves.
I feel like it's like 70% of like portraiture editing or fashion editing, or at least as a former portrait photographer, but like I used to do a lot of shoots with people. Like that was always my biggest, something that I felt like I had a good handle on retouching people, but it was just like it took so long, and I always thought, I was like, am I doing this wrong? Like, what am I missing? But if you try to do a shortcut, it just never looks natural.
It never looks natural.
To the point where I had like a tiny phase where I was like, well, then I just won't retouch the skin. Like I'll retouch like small little things that I can, but I was like, but I'll just keep it all natural. And so I thought, when I was transitioning more into like product and still life, I was like, oh, this will be so much better. Like there's no skin involved, but I'm finding like with something like this, I'm like, you know what? It's all about the details, no matter what you're focusing on.
Exactly. And details take a bit more of attention and time, and patience is the biggest thing. But at the end of the day, it pays off.
It does. I think it does. And even like sometimes, especially with something like this, where it's like, it might not make a difference to whoever is looking at it for way less time than you looked at it, but it really does make a difference, I think, in the grand scheme of things. And also just like to you as an artist, knowing that you like finished an image the exact way that you wanted to.
Exactly. You didn't take those shortcuts. You just kind of, did what needed to be done.
Exactly. Which is how we end up here doing this. Retouching plastic toys.
But yeah, how often are you, and you may have said this earlier, but are you just primarily doing food photography now, or do you every now and then still do portraiture?
Every now and then I still will shoot people. I think especially more and more recently. And I think it's just like been the byproduct of me wanting to be around people more again after such like an isolated last couple of years at this point. And
Oh, my heart.
I know. And
couple of years.
I know. I can't believe here we are. But it was great at first, especially just working with a lot of products, like knowing that I had the flexibility to continue to work and to be that flexible that I could just be shooting in my living room or basically my living room or my bedroom were the options at first. And but at the same time, like at that point, I was just under a year of like my first true year as a freelance photographer and coming off of the creative residency. And so I feel like a lot of what I learned and how I learned to work in this field was in the pandemic, or is in the pandemic. And so after about a year of it, maybe even less, I realized the importance of trying to be on set with people again, and whether that meant like just having a bigger crew that I was working with, or actually like focusing maybe more on jobs that were more people centric. It was super beneficial just to feel like I wasn't alone in my own little world and just like getting too into my own ways of doing things versus like learning industry standard, or even just remembering those like soft people skills of how to interact with talent on set and direct them. So it's definitely something that I still and I'm actually like have been focusing on a little bit more as of late, just because I feel like it's nice to keep those skills handy. And it's also just something that I realized I was kind of missing, just connecting with different people and working with them and being able to capture them in a certain way. So it is great. So best of both worlds.
It is the best, especially being able to work in your own space. And I'm sure though, now that you have your studio, that do you like being able to separate now that you have your studio, do you like being able to separate work from home? Because I can only imagine, because sometimes I create at home and I'm creating my bedroom and my bed is right there and I just want to go to sleep, or if you're living with other people.
It is nice to have the separation. I do kind of miss like the spontaneity of knowing that you have everything at your fingertips in your room or somewhere in your house, because you can sort of just like break up the equipment and do whatever you need to do. And so that was like a really big adjustment when I eventually outgrew shooting out of my home and needed a proper space. Is it's all much more planned now, but I think in a way, because this is what I do for my career, like I kind of need it to feel more like work. And then when it is like something personal or just an experiment, like it's actually, I've learned for it to be really nice to like go and travel and do it somewhere else, and to keep the mess out of my home. And to keep it separate, because it's also helpful to then know like I'm working maybe under some sort of deadline, right? I have to go home eventually, and I can't either postpone it and lay in bed, or I can't like shoot all night. I mean, I could, but I don't want to.
You don't want to, so it's creating those boundaries now.
Exactly. So it's there's definitely pros and cons, but when I was doing the residency, I was a resident from 2018 to 2019, and I was I think the only one in New York City, and it was I was always so like not jealous of the other residents, but I mean, we all had like our own practices, but they just had like more room to work, it felt, than what I needed to do trying to do studio photography. And luckily, like I developed a pretty good system of rearranging my furniture every day to be able to shoot in I had like very understanding roommates that were very patient with me. But I also felt so limited so much of the time, because I would only have room for like one light or two lights. And so when I did move out of that space, I feel like I'm more empowered with more tech, just to be able to do what I need to do.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. So I with the pandemic, a lot of the work that I was personally doing, because I as a portrait photographer, I shoot people, but when there is a pandemic going on, you can't really do that. And so I had to find ways to stay creative. And I would do a lot of my shooting at home, which I loved because, like you said, just having everything at your fingertips. Like I could literally get up. I didn't have to leave the house. I could just I would have everything stored somewhere and I'd be able to easily set up. But then sometimes it just didn't feel like work. It felt like, like, I don't know what it felt like. It just kind of felt like I was living a mess. Because I was in a smaller space at that time, and I would have my bed, and then I would have my photo stuff over here, and then I would have my desk, and I felt really cramped having to do everything in one space. So there's pros and cons to it for sure, but I commend you for having your own studio. I think that's a really exciting thing to have.
It is. It's definitely been a long time in the making. So
yes,
it's something that I try not to take for granted at this point, and that I try to make the most out of. I think I'm good. This looks pretty clean to me. I just saved it. So now I'm just gonna go.
And I'm glad you saved it.
I saved it. Yes. I need to remember, I think I got a head start on exporting some of these files, but I am going to now do the same thing with the base
popsicles. And we have a question that I will pull up. First, Anika said, "Oh, that reminds me of a podcast episode on Shirley Card's Portraits Are Hard." I'm gonna have to check out that podcast because what's the name of is it called Shirley Cards, or is Shirley Cards the person? If you can drop more information about that podcast, Anika, I know that I would love to go and watch that and listen to that. But we do have a question, Aaron. If you have to choose one type of light to pick, which one would you pick? Would it be soft, medium, hard, umbrella, para? What would you, what's your kind of go-to situation?
I had to pick one. Honestly, if I had to pick one, it would be some sort of external flash that I could just, which might be silly, but as technical as I feel like my work gets, I don't love photography for like the technical aspect. Like that's not why I got into it. That's not something that I've ever felt like I had like a truly good handle on. And I think when I first started shooting a lot, like I would do so with just like an on-camera flash, because I felt like I could like, it was less about the lighting and it was more about just like creating really cool compositions and capturing the right things. And I still like turn to that sometimes. But I think like in my day-to-day, I love a beauty dish, and I love a beauty dish for food and for product. And that's simply only because I was meeting a photographer once in my residency year that told me and challenged me to do so, because he was saying that like nobody really uses a beauty dish in food. I think just because it is a little bit more contrasty than like a softbox or a flag or something. And so he kind of saw in my work how poppy it was and contrasty. And so it's something that I've tried to like play around with that I still haven't quite mastered, but I like to do for like really making the like hero parts of the image pop and stand out in a different way.
That's exciting. I know that one of the challenges that I have as a photographer, I am a natural light type of gal. And so one of the challenges that I have for this year is to branch out. I have done some studio work very rarely, but I have, but I'm not comfortable with lighting at all. And so that's a challenge that I have for myself this year, is just being able to be like, all right, get out of your comfort zone and try something new and see what can you create with, different equipment. I'd love to use what I have easy access to. And I think that I always encourage other photographers to use what you have access to. But sometimes if you can challenge yourself to grow as a creative, it's important to do so. So that's something that I'm saying reminding myself of, listening to you talking about your favorite lights as well.
Yeah, similarly like only used to use natural light for everything, especially when I first moved to New York. I just didn't have access to any sort of studio space or anything. And so I kind of like knew, I was like, all right, I gotta get back out there with this natural light thing and try to figure it out. And it actually like, it was great because it made me then approach photography again, prioritizing really nice compositions and, you know, like prioritizing the actual image versus how I made the image. And then I just kind of fell back into studio over time, just more in line with the overall aesthetic and the bright poppy colors and just like really just like how clean I could get everything and how like in focus I could get all the details and well lit I could get all the details. But when I made that transition, I and still am like very intimidated by a studio. And I think just because can be such like a foreign world, it feels like it can feel very overwhelming. I just kind of try to remind myself that I'm like, it's literally not rocket science. And like the priority is like making an image that you feel looks good. And so as long as you find a way, similar to like retouching and working in Photoshop, like as long as you find a method to lighting, like however you want to light something and it looks good for what you're going for, then that's the right way for you to do it.
Exactly.
And like there are hundreds of ways to get to that maybe like final result of whatever sort of like shadows or depth of light that you're going for. But even if it's like one light or a bare flash with some bounce cards or whatever it may be, like it's pretty easy to fall into like some sort of default comfort and approach, which I think then allows you to like focus on why you like creating and like how you create. But I think it's a great challenge.
No, it is. And I think that it's a good thing, like you just said, to just remind yourself that there are many ways to do something. And sometimes I can get intimidated by studio photography because I'm like, oh my goodness, like what if I don't do things correctly? And I'm like, but you also like don't do things correctly in everything other aspect and you make it work for you. So that is the important part of just being able to make something work for you. Fairy did say, they always challenge themselves by trying to shoot JPEG only. One shoot, crop if I need to, and up. That is, wow. Like, wow. I couldn't do it. I mean, probably, I'm not gonna say I can't, but sometimes we also rely on so many different things, and like, that's a challenge that I would love to do as a photographer myself. Like, how can I get the image that I want just by shooting?
As closely as possible,
as closely as possible. But I know that it'll probably just, like you said, just be close as possible because I still need to do at least my color editing, my color grading.
Yes. And that's something that I like cheat a lot on set with, I feel, because I tether it into Lightroom Classic and kind of like what we were doing with these before exporting, like setting all of those presets, you can also set as you're shooting. And especially like with a client or truly anyone else that you're maybe is around when you're shooting, like if you really want to impress them, you can just like add that little bit of contrast or just like really set the white balance and all the images will show up that way, which is like,
oh wow, that's good
great
to know.
Yeah, it's that's like the main reason why I like to use it, because that way too it also helps me as the photographer visualize that like final result that I'm going for, or just knowing like, oh, maybe this background color isn't right, or I can't push this as much in real life, like I can't make this orange a brighter orange, but I know that I can just quickly adjust these sliders or put on a layer mask that will load for every single one for me to be able to like see that as close as possible without further edits.
Yeah. This popsicle is coming a long way.
It sure is. So I just threw like just a darker gray neutral background, and then I was using the smudge tool to like push in the edges again, kind of like we were doing yesterday, just to make sure that there was no leftover sort of like lighter neutral around it. And I think this way too, now if we like choose any color, it looks pretty isolated and pretty natural, which is good. And then I'm just going in now and adding this stick, and we'll do the same thing. This was harder to cut out because it was so close to the background tone, but such an easy shape that I feel like with my brush I can
You can kind of paint that back in.
Yeah. Have that pen tool again, which is nice.
Ferry said, should we make that as a photography challenge? Yes. So find a way to challenge yourself, whether that is with lighting, whether that is shooting with JPEG only, like a one shot, you're done kind of ordeal, or close to your final image. I think that kind of keeps things exciting and kind of teaches you different lessons as well. So y'all have, I'm going to try to find the time, especially this year. The studio photography is a huge goal of mine, because I think that will now allow me to tap into another area of my work, and to be able to say, okay, like this is something that I can be an expert in my own way at.
Yeah. And I think what's nice about pushing yourself no matter what is, even if like, I feel like the default mindset that I always kind of trip myself up about is creating something thinking that it will be a success or that I will want to take it further and or develop it or use it. And I think like you just learn so much in a new approach that sometimes the payoff is more in what you learn than what the result is. And I think like maybe that's been actually a challenge that I've been working on for the last 6 months or so, is like creating work without the intention of it going anywhere or doing anything. And not only just creating it for me, but even just like to learn what I can learn. And if I'm approaching a project and thinking like, if I know that nobody's going to see this, how can I push myself and try those new things that I maybe have been too afraid of, and just really go for it. And it most of the time doesn't work, but then I know I can figure out why it doesn't work and then try again.
Can't forget that shadow.
No, I might end up putting it in manually, just because looking at this now that I'm happy with this, I'm going to apply it on this. But I really don't like, they were all like this. I remember when I was shooting, because I was trying to find the most perfect popsicle, but like this like overhang of like the base of it. So I'm just gonna get rid of it, which means I might have to get rid of the whole top. But
got it.
So I'm kind of just gonna look at this like bottom line and prioritize that, shaping that of what I want it to be as naturally-ish as I can. So just sort of making sure that the pop is like the correct length so that it doesn't look too weird. And maybe just like rounding off those edges a little bit to mimic what was advertised.
Awesome. And just a reminder, we will be doing our artist spotlight in a couple of minutes as well. Really excited to look into that. Well, that looks a lot better too.
Yeah, and then I can just go ahead and with my brush and mask out, just pretend like that part never happened. And that way too, it gives us like a more straight on perspective of the pop to start with. See, I don't know if you can hear that background noise. Of course, it's been quiet this whole time, but now there's some sort of loud truck outside, so I apologize.
Like we said yesterday, the beauty of New York.
Yep. So we're just going to manually add that shadow, creating a levels, and then using a really thin brush on a really opacity just to paint it, kind of mimic like what we saw before.
Yeah.
Mostly that. That's too much. 10. More defined for the top of it. Nice. All right, I feel good about that.
Awesome. So we feel good about that. I think this is a good point for
Yes.
us to kind of prepare for that artist spotlight. I see some people asking. Sean said, any spot sneaks, who is being spotlit? You're about to see in a couple of seconds. Again, if y'all want to make any nominations for someone in the future for a future Adobe Live, please go ahead and fill out the artist spotlight form. You will see it at the top of the chat box. So you'll see chat, you'll see info, and then artist spotlight. So click on artist spotlight so that way you can nominate yourself. If you're feeling like, you deserve the spotlight, nominate yourself. Or if you know of another artist that you think would be great for us to recognize, please go ahead and add them there. But I think with that, we can go ahead and pull up our artist spotlight before we continue. So who do we got?
All right, we have Tabitha Brooke. She is a photographer. It looks like she does a lot of portrait sessions, whether it's weddings or engagements or even just people in studio, but with natural light, which is really interesting.
Yes.
Really, really great galleries.
Just right off the bat, I think one thing that I love about photography is being able to capture intimate moments. And I think that she does a phenomenal job with that. Just in like a lot of her couple photos, the weddings that she does, you can feel the emotion behind the image, which I really, really enjoy.
Yeah, and I think what really, going off of that, and what's really special is just you feel like she really does a great job of capturing these intimate moments without being intrusive, and with just sort of like placing you in those scenes and really just existing as if like you're there. You can feel the environment more than just what's in the photo, and you can most of the time too, like her subjects aren't really engaging with the camera as much as they are what's around them, which I think is a hard thing to do, to feel connected as a viewer if they're not always directly connected to you. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just being able to, like, I don't know, like almost like you're a fly on the wall, and she's just kind of like capturing what already exists. She's not focusing on creating a moment. So I really enjoy, because you can feel the moment that's already there, and that you just kind of feel like you're kind of just watching it on a conversation or just spying on an intimate couple. So I really like that as well.
Yeah. And then when I was like poking around a little earlier, because we got a sneak peek, like I also just loved, as I opened up each gallery, just like the wide edit that she gives of each set, I think is, first of all, like a great sign of confidence as a photographer, just like not being afraid to show not everything that you shot, but a lot of what you shot. And it's kind of fun to look through and to visualize like how the shoot went, and just to know that like obviously these people had a lot of fun. I know I've always wanted to shoot in a skate park, and I've never found like there's not a lot of good like really deep ones in New York. So I'm also just very jealous of this gallery. But
it's either there's not a lot of good ones, or if I do find one, they're never like empty at a time that I could actually go and shoot.
Exactly. It's just like so consistent across the board too, and the approach and the colors and the edits. It's really, really nice, and it makes it very easy to digest.
Oh yeah, it's definitely very easy to digest. And I just like how she's playing with composition as well. Not everything, you can kind of challenge and just play around and just see what different views you can get for your photos. So it's not all the same, like spot on dead in the center. They might be, different. She'll play around with her composition, which I really like. Oh yeah, I want to look at that Simone gallery.
I was trying to get back to the homepage and it was not working.
Oh wow. And her use of natural light too.
Yeah, those shadow tones are so nice. I think it's nice to see her work. I know so much of it is environmental, but then taking it into the space, but then still feeling that same sort of intimate approach that she has in, with couples, or in something that might have been a more stage setup, still feels very, very effortless.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Light, which is nice. It's very nice.
I like the tone she uses as well, and that she's not afraid to have some black and white in there as well. I think that is she's a nice variety of different edits.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Ooh.
I don't know why I can never get back to the
What
home.
else? I think she had, let's see, a wedding that she had. I know there was one photo. Oh, these are so stunning. I don't know which one. Who do we want to go for?
Should we go? I'm just gonna scroll and oh, I was like, it's gonna be let's go here. We'll do a random draw.
Oh, wow, these are beautiful.
It's very nice. They feel, all of her work to me feels so like light but intentional. Like still like it's like colorful, but it's controlled and it's muted, but it's not dark and it's not bleak. It's still very like warm.
Yes, that's a good part. That's a good note there, that it's still, there's still life to it. It's not like very like extremely vibrant, but you can still feel that life of the photo seep through, which I really like.
Yeah.
And I just love, especially with her couples, when I don't shoot couples as often anymore, because honestly, like when I try to do wedding photography, it was not me and my body. Like I have one more wedding to shoot this year that I had already booked before I swore off weddings. But I love how her posing and a lot of her client shots, those are just very intimate and beautiful. And Douglas said it, that, you know, the posing is really dope as well.
Yeah.
How she captures detail. Oh, weddings are a lot.
They are a lot. I'm actually shooting a wedding on Saturday.
Really?
for like, not as a job, for like one of my dearest friends. And I haven't shot a wedding in 10 years. And it's just like not something that I ever felt good at. And so I've actually been looking at a lot of wedding photography lately because I'm very nervous. I'm like, oh, okay, it's like my best friend. I can't screw this up. So this is great inspiration.
Yeah, it sucks because like I love capturing moments in general. So weddings are really great because you can capture intimate moments and the photos always look so absolutely stunning. But it's just like the more I've done them, the last wedding I shot was in October. I have one more wedding that I scheduled early last year that is, I think, in March or May of this year. But I made the decision last year that I would stop just because physically it's a lot.
Yeah.
Or if I decide to continue, I'm just going to add a massage into my package.
That's a great thing to add.
Yes.
Yeah, I know it's tricky, right? Because and I think that's is what she does so successfully just across the board, and it translates to her other focus in work. Is just like being that fly on the wall, but still capturing these very intimate moments. And
those iPhone photos are really beautiful too.
I just always felt like so in the way when I was doing a wedding, because you don't want to be intrusive, but you want to make sure that you get everything that you need. And it seems like she does a really good balance of that.
Yeah, she does. It's just this. It's like she's a fly on the, like it's like she's not even there.
I know, it's.
Oh wow, yeah, this is absolutely beautiful, Tabitha. Great work.
It's beautiful.
So this is great inspiration, Aaron, for your next.
I know. I'm like taking mental notes. I am so nervous.
You got it. Oh my goodness.
It's all
10
natural,
years
right?
though.
I know. I truly have shot one wedding before, and I was like, and that's not for me, and that's okay.
That's okay. You kind of figure out as a photographer what works for you, what doesn't.
But when it's your best friend, it's like I would love nothing more than to do this for you. Like
I did that for my best friend. She got married in December of 2020. Yes, December 2020. And it was more of a it wasn't like a full wedding like this. It was just her and her partner. It was more of a COVID wedding, so it was just the two of them. Sure. They got married over they did a court wedding, but it was over Zoom. And I just spent the day like capturing them. So I love that because it was like it was like the story of COVID. We took some shots with masks on, so it felt like capturing the time that we're in. And if I could tell a story in the work, then I will say yes to it. Or if a couple has like a really cute story that I can try to show in the photos, whether it's how they met or whatever it is, I love to do that too. It's a lot of work, but there's some cases where you can't say no.
It's a lot of work, and it's like so much pressure when it's your best friend, but it's also like there's such a lenience there and trust that I feel like is really special, which is that they trust you that you will do exactly what you need and that you'll give them something that they will hopefully love.
Yes.
So it's the payoff is nice. I also just wanted to pull this gallery up. This is like from her commercial section, which I thought was really interesting to see like how her portraiture work might translate into something that's more food and product focused, but also lifestyle. I like caught my eye earlier and I was like, this is really, really nice. It's the same exact vibe to me as the rest of her work, just like being a part of this moment without being intrusive to it and making it feel just so effortless and natural. I love this photo.
This is beautiful. So great job, Tabitha. Congratulations on being on our artist spotlight for the day. Y'all should definitely check out her work. Cody, thank you for sharing Tabitha's website as well as IG. So go ahead and give them a follow. And if you would like to nominate yourself again or somebody else for an artist spotlight, click on that button at the top of the chat box. That way you can fill out that form to do so.
Great.
Beautiful. So we have, what is it, like 15-ish, 15, 16 more minutes left?
Okay. We're not going to get through it all. That's okay. I almost prepared for this. So I did set up like the base file where I'm not going to isolate everything for us one by one. I would never do that. So I do have the Popsicle in. I do have this Dynamite in, and then I have all of the rest of the pops that I isolated. Jumping ahead on the group ones, you can see where I like got rid of those rubber bands as I needed, but this gave me basically all the elements to figure out this composition, which was very tricky. And this one, because I felt it was kind of similar to the banana one in terms of going from like a pretty simple object to like a longer, skinnier tube-like object, I wanted to make it a little different. And so I wanted to challenge myself with this to have that popsicle rotating and morphing and splitting apart. And so that's why I have these like flipping around a little bit to sort of basically end up so that the top of the pop becomes like the bottom of the Dynamite.
Okay.
So I think I'm just going to play around with figuring out what this composition might be like, and then we'll see how much time we have. But at least with this one too, the actual shape manipulation was mainly in camera. Like it was less about, you know, straightening out the curved banana and more about figuring out those bits and pieces that would work together to create that story to get us where we need to go.
Yeah.
So even just by layering them a little bit more than the bananas, I can already start to see like your eye kind of moves with it, and getting rid of that, it's almost as if it like rotates up and then we lose that popsicle stick, and it doesn't really bother me by the time that it's totally flipped upside down. I also wanted to play around with just really increasing the shadows and the ridges to start to suggest that separation that we then have. Exactly. So even just playing around, maybe burning this in a little bit more to create that on top of like angling the light a little bit more, I think as I was shooting really helped. But again, this process took me forever to figure out. It's just, we would need a whole week to do it together.
I do like, what I really am enjoying about this one is, like you just mentioned, like just the flipping, like you can visually just see how it's transforming. Same with the banana, but I like the actual like flipping over. That's really, really cool, and how it leads to a separation.
And it's like, I think subtle enough where like you don't even have to notice it to like, there's not even like a question if you don't want there to be about how to get there. This one composition wise too, like I think I'm landing on this archway sort of approach, just because like I think with the movement of the popsicle flipping upside down, like it feels just like a very natural way for it to like go up and then land back down almost. And I think more than most of my work in this series, figuring out that rhythm and movement of the composition was like very key, and something that I feel like maybe I don't always focus on, or like never am able to control that closely. So this was like a very good practice to be able to do so.
Yeah.
So even with that, just placing where I know I want that final and that first to sort of create that archway, I think is a great step. And then I can go in and move these accordingly.
Ferry made a comment saying Popsicle is a total freeze bomb. The flavor explodes in your mouth and it freezes the brain and it freezes our teeth. Yeah, I love Popsicles. That was one of my favorite like sweet things growing up, but the brain freezes are so not it. Not it for me.
That's part of the reason why I think I actually was like always deterred by them as a kid, because I would always eat them way too fast, and so I had no patience. And then it wasn't until I was older that I learned that you could like press your tongue against the roof of your mouth to get rid of the brain freeze. And then I was like, oh man, I wish I knew that growing up.
So I could have enjoyed them more.
Like something tells me my parents didn't tell me that on purpose.
Because I just associated popsicles with like some kind of pain. Like
yeah. They are so good. I know, it's like never thought I'd be craving a popsicle in January, but here we are.
Here we are.
That looks just pretty good.
Yes.
And then I did something that I sought to do with this piece too, was I thought like to keep it in that very cartoony vibe was like, of course I have to have these fuses lit, right? Like they can't just be like, to give it that extra drama. So I did pull a few stock images from Adobe stock to try to implement it, and just I was like, I can't shoot my own sparkler, like there's just no way. There's just no way. So I did pull some references to see what would work best, knowing too that this would be super tricky. So we'll see how far we can get with this.
Okay.
And I can cheat it because I know what works and what didn't. But I think I'm automatically drawn to like this guy right here, because it seems like a pretty contained sparkle.
That's a great part about Adobe stock, is like sometimes you just don't have to go through the hassle of shooting everything. You can just use the resources that are available to you.
Exactly, especially with things like this that I feel like I would never be able to get to. So I'm just sort of trying to place it to see if it would work in the grand scheme of the image as well. That looks pretty good. It's right at the start of it. I remember when I was shooting this, I did have a moment of like, well, what if I just lit the tips of this on fire just really quick? And then I was like, well, it's just going to melt. It's plastic. It's not actually going to react. So
it's not going to do anything.
I was like, maybe that's not worth it. I'm just going to go in with the color range. This time I'm going to increase it a lot, just because I feel like since it is such a dark background, I might be able to get away with selecting more of the tones. Let's see where that gets us. It's actually not.
That is not bad.
Too bad. You can see like the definitely around the edges. General. So I do think we have to figure out a way to minimize that. Maybe just painstakingly paint away the like actual base of the sparkler as well without losing too much of sparks. Even still though, it like still leaves this like weird dark outline. So I think now it's about maybe with selective color actually. I wonder what we can do to like, so even just like bringing up those.
Barry suggested that you could set the blend mode to screen. Maybe that could help.
It's not a bad idea.
That's not a bad idea, actually.
Maybe then if I keep this normal and then even just, I could go in and like paint around the edges a little bit. Just because I do like how like full range we get in the middle. Like I feel like that's important to keep it realistic. I think it's like there's a technique that is now blanking in my mind, of course, but something about if we then select, I can color range my color range. No, I say basically it would like cut it in a couple of pixels so that we just like mask out those edges.
Yeah.
But the other option too is maybe with that screen mode on, unlinking and then smudging in. Or even blurring. I wonder what that would do. That outline to like soften.
Yeah, soften that.
Because we're only blurring the selection, we're not actually blurring the image, and you can start to see around here how that starts to help.
Awesome. And we have about 5 more minutes left, y'all. So if you have any questions that you want to get and and ask Aaron, please drop them in the chat. Because this is not your last opportunity, but of this 2 days.
Last opportunity ever. No.
So if you have any questions that you would like to ask, please do so.
Also wondering too, like if we do go with like a darker background, like I know I initially shot this, like maybe there's more leeway with
another background,
the background.
That way you don't see those edges as much. You really don't see them at all now.
Yeah. I've always really liked purple and red together too. Yes. I think it's like a really nice specific combination, but now, of course, there's so much to clean up. We're going to leave at such a messy spot, but just like making sure, I guess I could kind of do similar to what I did with the bananas and just creating like a dark overlay, but only on top of where the wires are and not getting rid of those highlights at all, but using a really soft brush just to like sharpen up sides there. Because now that we're on a darker background, maybe we just need to give into it for that spark. That's kind of a highlight, actually. That one's done.
Yeah, that's nice.
That's looking already just a little bit better around there. And then what we can even do, like I like how cut and pasty it's looking on, on that very flat background. But I also kind of think I could go in, maybe duplicate this color and just give the spill over to the, just a little bit. If I do like maybe a hue adjustment and then paint in just around the edges to help it blend a little more as if we shot it on purple.
Yeah, no, that's a really, again, that attention to detail that I'm sure you have to have when you're shooting like creative things like this, but that attention to detail is something I wouldn't have thought about as far as making sure it looks a bit more, like you said, like you shot it on this backdrop.
It's definitely something that I've just learned over time. And I think like it's like the subtractive method of like staring at an image for too long and wondering like, why doesn't this look right? And like the color temperature in that fall off is something that I've learned to sort of go and paint in, similar to how I thought like, with skin, I was painting a lot or whatever of like shadows and highlights. And I thought that I would never have to do that anymore. And now I'm like, but now I just do it to like really strengthen those tones or really control the tones in one part of the image.
Yeah, no, that is a great trick that I had never really thought about. So I'm just been adding things to my little, like in the back of my brain, adding them to my back pocket. But awesome.
Now just painting over the image for no reason. There we go. We're back.
And as we begin to wrap up, what did this final image look like originally? That'd be kind of cool to see.
I can actually show you guys. That's not the right page. So I originally did this, and I mentioned this yesterday, for this project with this agency called Yummy Colors, and they do an annual concept of the year, which is a response by, I think it was like close to 70 or 80 different artists this year, of a prompt, and it was a sleepwalking prompt. So this is where that's like a very general overview, but this was what the final ended up like. I think I ended up with a spark that had a little bit more of the center to feel like it was really like lit. And then once I did make that purple modification, I kind of liked this gradation of going from like a yellower pop to the red Dynamite. And also just to tie it back with this one, looking at like the tones in this.
I love. Awesome. Aaron, thank you so much for sharing this with us, sharing your process over these past 2 days. And thank you all so much for joining, being active in the chat. I'm really excited. Of course, you can refer back to these recordings on YouTube or Behance if you missed anything. And make sure you do check out Aaron's Instagram, website, etc., to show him some love. But before we sign off for today, I definitely want to encourage you guys to stick around for the Creative Encore of Illustration Daily Creative Challenge with Andrew Hockrattle at 12 p.m. You're going to be able to join part 2 of the packaging design with Chris Porter, as well as he works on branding and packaging design for a fictional beverage company. So with that, I will give you guys a sad farewell. Aaron, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And
it was fun.
Yes, it was a lot of fun, and I hope y'all enjoy the rest of your week.
Bye.
Bye.